In talking about the world, do Spiritists have any responsibility in the world preservation? Are we taking care of nature and its resources? Well, it is time to address these issues with our next speaker, Daniel Assisi, whose talk will be Hope in the World Sustainability.
Daniel Assisi has spoken on spirituality and Spiritism throughout the US and abroad. A founding member of the Spiritist Institute, Daniel has also been an active participant in the Spiritist movement in California for over 15 years. Passionate about education, Dr. Assisi works with public schools and education reform in California and holds a doctorate degree in education and a master's in public administration. Let's welcome Daniel Assisi.
When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. When I grew up, I put away these childish things. For now we see things as if through a glass darkly. Later, we will see more clearly as if face to face. Now, we know in part. Later, we will know fully. Good morning. I'm Dan Assisi, and our topic today is Hope for the World, Sustainability, Spirituality, and the Future. And I beg for your indulgence, as I have slightly tweaked the wording of the topic that was given to me so that it could be more palatable to myself. But these words that I told you before, I hope caught your attention. They are the words of Paul the Apostle in his letter to Corinthians, an early congregation that he created 2,000 years ago. And they still ring true, at least to my ears. And you may be asking, what does Paul have to do with world sustainability? And I hope that in due time, I will make the case, decently, that it has everything to do. And that Spiritism, when it enters the fray, it helps us see things differently. It helps us comprehend the world in such a way as to shift our perception. Because this is a serious problem. The care of our planet and our world is not a nicety, but it is a moral imperative. The world, it is our blue chariot that takes us through space and gives us the opportunity to evolve. And as such, we must take good care of it. And at the end, I hope to leave you with one fundamental question, which I won't tell you right now, because I want you to pay attention. And I know that some of you who are very anxious might be hitting yourself wanting to know the question, so please don't fall asleep. But if 4 billion years ago, some heavy gases detached from the solar nebula and slowly cooled down over time as to assume a physical mass that will continue to transform into our planet, giving way to volcanoes who eventually spew more material into the atmosphere, creating the oceans which bred life, which eventually evolved billions of years later to what we are today. 4.5 billion years ago, people, our planet was born. It is 1/3 the age of the universe. But 4.5 billion years later, we find ourselves in a bit of a crossroad, and we face some challenges that we want to be clear about. We are in trouble. We see, and it's been scientifically proved, that our climate throughout the world is changing in ways that are somewhat unpredictable and have severe consequences. We have also been careless enough to affect the landscape of Earth with innumerous natural disasters that are man-made, such as oil spills. We have also been so wasteful as to gather large amounts of trash that remain away from our eyes for now, but soon enough must be dealt with. And last but not least, we have also been polluting our oceans, the organic soup from which we came, and that sustains lives to this day. It is a dark painting that we are talking about here right now. It is a difficult moment for humanity because we have been unable to realize that the consequences to our actions are having serious impact in this world that hosts us for the time being. And yes, we could be pessimistic, but instead, we want to call on the great influence of our mentors and guides to bring forth the fact that there is indeed reason for hope. And that hope is better understood sometimes through the prism and the lens of Spiritism. So if you indulge me, I want to shift gears a tiny little bit to say that Spiritism has a big contribution here because it's a progressive body of knowledge that has continued to enlighten us for more than 160 years, recalling some beautiful old wisdoms up to the surface so that we may finally understand that. A couple of things have come to light that have fundamentally changed the way we can see the world, the universe, and ourselves. Because through experimentation, mediumistic experimentation, we Spiritists have spent quite a large amount of time dealing with what is now an irrefutable fact. Life goes on. We live after our physical bodies. How do we know this? Through mediumship, the core of Spiritism. We can no longer deny that after this life, we will cease to be, because we still communicate and talk with those who are here before us. And during these conversations, we have shifted our focus from trying to prove whether there is afterlife or not, because we have now been satisfied that there is. And we are now more concerned with the implications of afterlife. In that sense, then, we have established for ourselves that the immortality of the soul cannot be denied. And if we are immortal, then what does that mean to each one of us? If we are truly going to last forever, then how do our current actions impact our future realities? Through our conversations with good and enlightened spirits, we have even gone further, and we have also learned that there is such a thing as reincarnation. And reincarnation is a mind changer. It is a complete shift into everything there is. When we learn about reincarnation and start to consider its implications, it is as if we are being unplugged from the matrix. Because the world around us changes fundamentally. We understand that the physical world is a world of illusion, is a temporary world, and that we, creatures of the light, of spirit, who are going to live forever, may take as many vessels as necessary for us to continue our spiritual evolution. And as we understand that process and literally have that sink into our souls, not just cognate in our brains, but truly accept and ask ourselves, what does that mean? We are faced with an interesting paradigm shift. We start to think not of our earthly success, but instead of our spiritual development. We begin to understand further through these conversations with the enlightened spirits, of which we have an incredible amount of materials to back in the Spiritist codification, including the incredible and marvelous book, the Spirit's Book, that turned 161 years just on April 18th. We begin to understand that if we are constantly evolving as spirits, we go from less enlightened to more learned. And then Paul comes back to mind. Because when we are less enlightened, we act like children. And so the question that resonates is, are we in our childhood, in our adolescence, or in our spiritual maturity? Although we all like to believe that we are as cute and cuddly as that little guy over there, I would say that perhaps we may find ourselves in a spiritual adolescence. We are all teenagers of the soul. And if we talked about our blue chariot, this planet, this vehicle for our evolution, that goes through the universe, giving us the opportunity to be born here with the same group of people or a different group of people, depending on the situations, and evolve as we track to the universe and infinite. We ask ourselves, how do we feel about giving the car keys to the teenagers? Right? When we are young and we are children, all we can do to the car is mess up its interior. We can have our food spill everywhere. We can have our cereal fall through the backseat cracks. If you're a parent, you might relate to what I'm talking about. You may have to ensure that the kid is properly attached to the car seat, not as to cause further damage. But ultimately, the amount of trouble is contained. What gets really dangerous is when the teenager first starts to learn to drive. Because all of a sudden, we have somebody who's not mature yet and wants to take the car as fast as it probably can, anywhere, really fast, to impress the friends. And I wonder if perhaps that is the phase we find ourselves in our spiritual evolution when it comes to ecology and world sustainability. To suit our own interests, as good teenagers that we are, we have been driving this blue car as fast and as recklessly as we can so that we can blast the radio and enjoy the benefits that it can afford us, to the extent that we can get now and today. We're not worried if you may run out of gas. We may not worry if we're screeching the tires as we're driving. We just want to go because it's good to lower down the windows and feel the air in our hairs, if we have hair. Which you can tell I'm a little bitter about. But it comes a point in our spiritual evolution, as Paul so wisely told us 2,000 years ago, when we must mature and we must put aside childish things, where we must learn to obey the speed limit, to maintain the car, to take it for an oil change, to wash it every once in a while. Because this one is not as easy to trade in. It is this home of ours. It's hosting us for God knows how long. must be paid attention to. So we need to change the way we look at the world. And that includes our own actions. It is not dissimilar from the change that sometimes we make when we go from renters to homeowners. When we're renting a place, we're not that worried about the damage, at least when we're younger. And security deposit, okay, 1 month's worth of rent. I'll be out anyways, I'll go to the next one. But when we own, we begin to look at things differently. Oh, maybe I need to paint this one. Oh, don't open the door too quickly, it might hit the wall and dent it. Ooh, should I oil my front gate? You take a sense of ownership and possession, and you take care of things, which is exactly what we are supposed to do spiritually as we progress. One of my favorite questions in the Spirit's book is questions 132, and is the question that I feel is about the meaning of life. And it tells what many of our speakers have told us here today, which is the meaning of our existence, our spiritual existence, is to constantly evolve and grow. And then it ever so slightly sneaks a second part in there that the teenagers, from a spiritual perspective, don't always pay attention to. And the good spirits continue and say, because it is our duty to take our part in the creation. So it's not about just me, give me the keys. It is about give me the keys to the car so I can also help shuttle other people places. You see, when we reach our spiritual maturity, we stop living just for ourselves. We begin living for others too. We start to considering those. And perhaps that is one of the reasons that divinity has allowed us to have children. And if you have children, you know, you can no longer live for yourself alone. I long for those days where I could decide to go for dinner in the spur of the moment and be out of the house in 5 minutes. Right? But now I have the pleasure of taking this tiny human with me that one day will be a fully grown human and it will make me proud. Already does. But you see my point? My point is that we are making this spiritual transition from adolescence to maturity. And one of the factors that we must pay attention to is that we are littering the place. So, does that mean the world's going to end? I want to say no. Because it's been 4.5 billion years in the making. Let us not be the ones who trash the place. Let's pass it on to our children, because we also know that we may be our children's children. So it is in our interest to ensure the best possible conditions in this planet, on this planet, for this planet. Because if we are lucky, we get to come back. So do yourself a favor. Be spiritually selfish in a good way. Do yourself a solid. Help us class up the place. Right? But I tell you, there is indeed hope. Because we can affect meaningful change when we so choose. And there is evidence for hope. More and more, we see the growth of recycling programs. Actions as simple as separating your trash, or making sure that your bottle of water goes to the right place, or better yet, that you don't use a disposable bottle of water. Join the hipsters out there. Grab a nice bottle that will last for a while so that we don't produce as much waste. The new generations are catching up. Can we as well? There is also wonderful news showing us that our actions have great positive effects if we are ready to be mature. We all remember in our younger ages, maybe when we were children back in the 80s and 90s, that we had a problem, the ozone layer. The layer of gas that covers the atmosphere was starting to recede at the poles, and more harmful ultraviolet radiation was coming in because we were using certain chemicals. We have since decreased our use of those chemicals, and we are happy to read in Newsweek just earlier this year that there is scientific proof that the ozone layer has started to heal itself and is returning to previous levels. What a beautiful thing. We have changed something, and it has yielded beautiful consequences. A proof that we can and we do make a difference. And more importantly as well, we are now investing in renewable energy, in finding ways of leveraging the energy of this world, of the universe, to take care of our needs without leaving a substantial footprint behind. Isn't that beautiful? We are finding a way, people. We can find our way. So, as we begin to think of the world as a whole, and understand that it has been taking us through this wonderful experience of being alive so that we can put ourselves to the test that we have asked for, so that we can practice the virtues that will lead us to happiness, we cannot think but to say that it's fundamental and pressing that we pay attention to the world we live in, because this world needs to evolve too. Everything in nature moves forward. So the question that we learn with taking care of the world is a question that we can also transpose to anything else, because the beautiful teachings of high above can be applied in many different places. So the fundamental question that I ask you today, and I need not an answer, so you know, it is a rhetorical question. I know some of you get really excited and start answering, but each one's got their own answer is, are we taking more than we're giving? As human beings living on this planet, are we taking from the earth more than we're giving back? If we are, then what is it that we can do? It could be as simple as, when I go to the beach, I will not leave any trash behind, but that's not enough. And I will pick up one extra piece of trash that somebody left behind. If all of us do this, in no time, we will revert any damage to this planet. So what is asked of us is, can we be emotionally and spiritually mature to make this commitment to ourselves, to each other, for our own benefit and that of the planet? Can we have a lasting impact by simply tweaking small habits? And this question is one that can also be applied to any other relationship that we may have. In the spiritual bank of life, we ought to ask ourselves, are we making more withdrawals than deposits? In the relationships we have with each other, be as ourselves spouses, friends, colleagues, co-workers, are our relationships with each other more on the taking side or more on the giving side? And I would hope that we would aspire to always strive to be the ones who are giving a little bit more every day. It does not mean that you must give to exhaustion. It means that we just have to try to be good stewards of our planets and of our own spiritual evolution by trying a little bit harder tomorrow than we did today. That's all that is asked of us. We're not asked to do great acts of love all of a sudden. We're not asked to change the world in a whim. All that we're asked to do is to be a little bit better every single day, to try a little bit more, to remind ourselves that we are immortal spirits, children of God, immensely loved. Can we reflect that love to others? Can we pass that on? Because passing it on to others is passing it on to ourselves. It is in giving that we receive, St. Francis said. Because when we give love and we help others, we develop these bonds of affection and love around us that grow our spiritual family, which in turn benefits us. Because the more we love and the more we have people loving us, the more love we receive because they too love us. It's not a selfish act. It's an act of beauty. But all of that requires a decision to be conscious, to be disciplined to the extent that we can, and to grow. And as we find ourselves in the crossroads of our lives today, every day, because every day we have a chance of impacting our lives for the future through the law of cause and consequence. Let us not forget that. And let's remind ourselves of this beautiful message that Paul has left us in 1 Corinthians when he said, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. When I grew up," and that's what we're hoping to do spiritually, "I put away childish things. I put away the desire to just satisfy myself." Because now we only see things in part. We only see part of it because we are not fully cognizant of our spirituality yet. So we only see the physical. But later, as we evolve, we will see the whole. And it will make things wonderfully better. Now we know in part. Later, we will know in full. And he goes on to tell us, to give us hope for the future, reminding us that God loves us and that our trajectory to light is unstoppable. It only is a matter of time. He goes on and he tells us, "And now these three remain." And you know this: faith, hope, and love. And all of these, the greatest is love. Because now our faith is rational and we understand why things are the way they are. Which reminds us that we can and we will overcome any challenges ahead of us because God and God's loving ways never gives us a task that is beyond our ability to fulfill it. So we can tackle this. So there is reason for optimism, but it requires love, which is action. So I hope that more and more you can strengthen yourself in the faith, the rational faith that Spiritism has brought us and continues to bring us as it grows and develops over time, that it may find root in your heart to establish the certainty of hope that we must all have when we believe in God, and that it may spring you into action so that you may be an agent of change for the world and for yourselves. That is my hope for you, and I thank you so much for your time and for your patience.